I never thought paying for my only son's wedding would end with me sitting in my car like a stranger banned from my own child's celebration. My phone buzzed again. "It's her day, Mom. Don't make a scene." That was all he said. No call, no apology, just a text like I was some nuisance to swat away. Inside, I could see the glowing chandeliers through the windows of the venue I paid for. I heard faint laughter, champagne glasses clanking, and I sat there, forgotten invisible in a world I had built for them. It started months earlier. Emily gushed over every detail: the silk tablecloths, the honeymoon in Italy, her Vera Wang gown, and every time I signed the checks. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, I told myself. He deserves a perfect day. Now that perfect day didn't have a place for me. Emily's message hours earlier was even colder. "Please don't come to the reception. I want this night to be about my family, her family, like I wasn't blood, like I hadn't drained my savings so my son could propose with a ring that wouldn't embarrass her." Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet, just quiet, heavy, dangerous quiet. "They took my love and turned it into entitlement," I whispered. "They'll regret teaching me how disposable I am." That night, I drove home in silence, headlights slicing through the black road. The house felt colder than usual as I stepped inside. Same furniture, same walls, but it felt like a stranger's home. I opened the leather folder on the counter. Page after page of receipts, the venue deposit, the catering invoice, her dress. Tens of thousands, all paid directly from my account. At the top of the fridge, a business card clung to a magnet. Peter Holloway Estate Law. Dolores gave it to me months ago, just in case. I stared at that little card like it was oxygen. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how to please them. I was thinking about how to take my life back. My finger hovered over the phone. "Do it," I whispered to myself. "Call him right now." And I did. The phone rang once, twice, then a calm voice answered. "Peter Holloway." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "My name is Olivia," I said. "My son and his wife, they think I'm nothing, but I paid for their entire wedding, and tonight they banned me from it." There was silence on the line. When Peter finally spoke, his voice was firm. "That's cruel, but it may not be hopeless." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tight. I want it all back. Every last cent. Peter paused. "All right," he said finally. "But if we do this, you need to be ready for war." 2 hours after that call, I was still sitting in the kitchen staring at the folder of receipts spread across the table. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. The venue deposit, $15,000. The catering, $8,700. Her Vera Wang dress, $6,200. Even the honeymoon in Italy, all paid directly from my account because they said, "You'll be part of every memory, Mom." I laughed bitterly. I wasn't even allowed through the door. My phone buzzed. It was Peter. "I've reviewed your situation," he said calmly. "There's good news and bad news. Which do you want first? The bad. If those payments were classified as gifts, it may be hard to claw them back. You didn't have a contract with your son or his wife. No agreement that they'd repay you. And the good," I whispered, gripping the edge of the table, "you paid most vendors directly from your account. Some balances weren't fully settled yet. And the honeymoon agency, they haven't been paid in full either. We have room to apply pressure. We demand repayment, threaten legal action, file liens where possible. If they resist, we escalate." I stared at the last receipt, the honeymoon travel agency, a small note at the bottom from Emily in her bubbly handwriting. "Thank you for making all my dreams come true." She got her dream, and now it was my turn. "Take it all back," I said hoarsely. Every penny. Peter didn't hesitate. "All right, but prepare yourself. They'll come at you with everything they've got." By the next morning, my living room had turned into a war room. Peter's office was already working. Legal letters drafted to the vendors, outstanding balances frozen pending repayment dispute. We request financial statements showing all payments received. At 10:42 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. How dare you?" The voice was shrill, venomous. It took me a second to place it. Emily's mother. "You're embarrassing my daughter," she screeched. Canceling their honeymoon, interfering with their newlywed plans. How dare you embarrass our family like this? I let her rant. Every word was fuel. When she finally stopped to breathe, I spoke quietly. You haven't seen embarrassing yet. 2 hours later, my son called. Mom, what are you doing? He shouted. You're ruining our lives. Emily's in tears. The travel agency won't finalize the trip because of you. I closed my eyes, clutching the phone tight. Why, I whispered. I sat outside your wedding like a stranger. I wasn't even good enough to watch you cut the cake. You let her ban me. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I snapped. My voice shook, but I didn't care anymore. You used me, Matthew. You and your wife used me until there was nothing left but humiliation. God, you're being dramatic, he said. It's her day, Mom. Why can't you let her have this? Why can't you just be happy for me? I felt something in my chest harden. The last fragile thread between us snapped. I was happy for you, I said coldly. When I thought you loved me, there was silence on the line. Don't do this, he said finally, his voice low now, almost pleading. But I was already gone. War, Peter had warned. I wasn't just ready for war. I was starting it. By the next morning, Peter's assistant had compiled every receipt I emailed neatly arranged in a thick folder with yellow tabs marking each vendor. This isn't just a wedding, Peter said, flipping through the pages. It's a financial roadmap, and I think we found your first real weapon. I leaned forward in my chair. The house, he said. You told me you gave them $75,000 for a down payment last year. I nodded. Emily cried when I handed her the check. She swore they'd pay me back within 12 months. Did you put it in writing? No, I said softly. I didn't think I had to. She was marrying my son. I trusted them. Peter sighed. That trust may save you. My brow furrowed. Legally, in this state, unless you signed a formal gift deed, the law assumes large financial transfers between family are loans, not gifts. I felt the breath catch in my chest. Meaning we can file a lien against the house. If they don't pay, the court can order repayment or foreclosure. I pictured Emily's face smug and glittering on her wedding day. I pictured her curling her fingers around the keys to that house, thinking she had won. And for the first time, I smiled. 2 hours later, the paperwork was filed. A thick stamp marked the lien notice. Pending review, County Recorder's Office. Peter's voice was calm but firm. This will hit them hard. Expect retaliation. It didn't take long. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang. Are you insane? Emily's voice exploded through the speaker. You're trying to take our house now. You're bitter because we set boundaries. That's all this is. You can't stand that Matthew finally chose me over you. You mean chose greed over loyalty, I said coldly. Don't play the victim, Olivia, she snapped. You're trying to destroy us, Emily, I said quietly. You destroyed yourself the day you taught my son to treat me like an ATM. I'm simply closing the account. The silence on the line was deafening. Then she hissed, You'll regret this. Click. The next morning, Peter called with news. They've hired a lawyer, he said. They're claiming the house money was a gift, but don't panic. We've got documentation of the check and Emily's own text message from last year. We'll pay you back in a year. I swear that's gold. As he spoke, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Matthew. You're ruining everything. Please, Mom, stop this before it's too late. I stared at the words, before it's too late. He still didn't get it. It was already too late. Later that afternoon, Peter sent me a copy of the filed lien. The county stamp looked official and final. They'll know about it by tomorrow morning, he said. Good, I replied, because when they saw that notice stapled to their front door, I wanted them to understand something clearly. The woman they underestimated isn't coming back, and neither is their easy life. The next morning, they finally saw the notice. At 9:04 a.m., my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I didn't even need to check the caller ID. Are you out of your mind? Matthew's voice roared the moment I answered. You filed a lien on our house. His words cracked like he couldn't decide whether to rage or beg. What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this to us? I stood in my kitchen staring at the coffee brewing slowly, steam curling upward. "I'm doing this," I said softly, "because you left me sitting in a parking lot like I was nothing. You let her ban me from your wedding after I paid for every last detail. That's not fair. No, Matthew." I cut him off, my voice sharp as broken glass. "What's not fair is spending my entire savings to give you a future while you carved me out of yours. What's not fair is handing Emily a check for a down payment because she swore on her life she'd repay me, and then watching her laugh in my face while she spends my money on silk napkins and spa days. You're twisting this," he shouted. "This was supposed to be about her. You're making everything about you." For a moment, I felt my hands tremble. But then I remembered the hours I spent in the car that night, staring at the glowing windows of their reception hall, my name nowhere on the guest list. "You're right," I said coldly. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about what I'm owed." "Mom," I hung up. 2 hours later, the messages started. "Emily first. You've gone too far. You're ruining your own family. You're pathetic." A bitter, lonely old woman trying to punish us for moving on. Then her mother. "How dare you humiliate my daughter this way? People are talking. The neighbors, the church. Everyone thinks you've lost your mind." The words rolled across my screen like poison, but I felt nothing. Not rage, not sadness, just clarity. They weren't angry because I hurt them. They were angry because for the first time I wasn't helping them. At 3:28 p.m., another knock rattled my front door. This time I didn't have to guess. It was Matthew. I watched through the peephole as my son, the boy I once rocked to sleep every night, stood on my porch, fists clenched, chest heaving. "Mom, open the door," he shouted. When I didn't move, he pounded again. "I just want to talk." Slowly, I unlocked the door and stepped into the doorway. Matthew's face softened slightly when he saw me, but I could still see the rage in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why are you tearing us apart? We're family." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word like ash in my mouth. "You let your wife ban me from your wedding. You let her send a text to tell me I wasn't welcome after I paid for the whole thing. You let me sit in my car all night watching strangers toast to your happiness while I cried in the dark. That's not what this is about." "That's exactly what this is about," I snapped, stepping closer. "I gave you everything, Matthew, my money, my time, my love, and you treated me like an inconvenience the moment I stopped being useful." Tears welled in his eyes. For a moment, I almost wavered. "Almost. Please," he whispered. "You're going to ruin us. Emily's falling apart. The stress is killing her." "Good," I said flatly. "Now she knows how it feels." His head jerked back like I had slapped him. "I loved you, Mom," he said softly, almost broken. "No," I whispered. "You loved my money." He stared at me for a long moment, then his face hardened again. "You're going to regret this." "I already regret raising a son who thinks love is measured in dollar signs," I said coldly. Then I stepped back and closed the door. His muffled curses faded as his footsteps retreated down the porch. That evening, Peter called. They filed a response through their attorney. They're contesting the lien, and Emily's family is pushing them to go on the offensive. "Let them," I said. Peter hesitated. "Olivia, this isn't just legal now. It's personal. They're going to smear you however they can." "Are you ready for that?" I thought of Emily's text calling me bitter. I thought of Matthew's face as he stormed off my porch. "I've been humiliated before," I said quietly. "It doesn't scare me anymore." There was silence on the line. Then Peter spoke, his voice low and even. "All right then. Let's hit them where it hurts." 2 weeks later, I sat in the back of a small courtroom, hands clasped tight in my lap. Across the aisle, Matthew sat stiffly in his tailored suit, his jaw tight, his knuckles white. Emily perched beside him in a cream blazer, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Behind them, her parents sat with their arms crossed, smirking like they were already counting the money they thought I wouldn't dare fight for. Peter leaned in toward me. "Stay calm. Let me do the talking." "I'm calm," I said softly. Though my heart was hammering against my ribs, the proceedings began fast. Emily's lawyer, a scar-faced man with a designer briefcase, stood first. His voice oozed with false politeness. Your Honor, my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Collins, are devastated that this family disagreement has escalated to litigation. The funds in question were clearly gifts given freely and without expectation of repayment. He flashed a rehearsed smile in my direction as if to say, "See, you're the unreasonable one here." Peter stood calm and steady. "Your Honor, there is no signed gift deed for the down payment my client provided. In this state, absent such documentation, large financial transfers are presumed loans, not gifts. Furthermore, we have evidence. A text message from Mrs. Collins herself acknowledging repayment was promised within 12 months. He held up a printed copy of Emily's message. "Thank you again for the down payment. We'll pay you back in a year, I swear." The judge took the paper, skimming it carefully. Emily's face went pale. An hour later, the arguments grew sharper. Emily's lawyer tried to paint me as a bitter, lonely woman lashing out because her son finally found independence. She was excluded from their wedding reception because of her controlling behavior, he said with a tight smile. This is not about repayment. This is about punishing her son and his wife for living their own lives. Peter's rebuttal was ice cold. My client gave nearly $50,000 toward a wedding she wasn't even invited to attend. She provided a down payment for their home on the condition of repayment that has never been honored. This isn't about control. This is about financial exploitation of an elderly woman. Emily whispered something to Matthew, her lips curling into a smirk. I saw his shoulders relax slightly. They thought they had won, but then the judge spoke. I'll need to review the financial records and text communications in detail before making a ruling. For now, the lien on the property will remain in place. Emily gasped. Matthew's head snapped up. The smirk on her mother's face evaporated as we stepped out into the courthouse hallway. Matthew caught up to me. "Mom, please, he said, his voice breaking. "Can't we fix this? You don't have to do this to us. We're family." I turned to him slowly. "Family." I repeated, my voice quiet but sharp. Family doesn't use each other like piggy banks. Family doesn't ban their mother from a wedding she paid for. That's not fair. No, Matthew. What wasn't fair was how you chose her over me over and over until there was nothing left to take except my dignity. Emily appeared at his side, then clutching his arm like a trophy. "You're just bitter because he finally has a woman who puts him first," she sneered. I looked her dead in the eye. "No, Emily. I'm finally putting myself first." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her expression as Peter and I walked out of the building. He leaned close. "They're lawyered up and desperate. Expect them to fight dirty." "Let them," I said. "I've spent years surviving their betrayal. They won't survive my resolve." 2 days after the court hearing, Peter called again. His voice was calm, but I could hear the edge beneath it. "Olivia, we found something you need to know." I gripped the phone tighter. "What is it?" "It's about your jewelry, the pieces you gifted Emily for the wedding." My stomach sank. "The diamond pendant, the pearl earrings, the heirloom gold necklace from your mother's estate. Do you still have them?" "I know," I stammered. "I gave them to Emily on her wedding morning. She promised to wear them for special occasions." Why, Peter's pause felt like a blade sliding in slow. "They sold them, Olivia, every last piece. The money went straight to a travel agent to upgrade their honeymoon package. First-class flights, a private villa in Venice, the room spun. I sat down hard at the kitchen table, my fingers clutching the edge until my knuckles burned. "They weren't theirs to sell," I whispered. "I know," Peter said softly. "We can press criminal charges, theft, conversion of assets. It's your call." I closed my eyes. That gold necklace had belonged to my mother. She'd worn it every Sunday to church. I remembered her warm hands fastening it around my neck on my wedding day. "Someday, pass this to your son's wife," she had said, smiling. A symbol of trust, and I had. I'd placed it gently into Emily's palm on the morning of the wedding, watching her eyes glisten with tears. "Thank you, Olivia. I'll treasure it forever." Forever, it seemed, lasted less than 6 months. That evening, Matthew showed up at my door again. I didn't answer. Through the window, I watched him pace the porch, running a hand through his hair. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Please, Mom." His voice cracked through the voicemail. "We didn't mean for it to get this far. Emily's parents are pressuring her. She's falling apart." I stared at my phone, letting it go to voicemail. He didn't mention the necklace. He didn't mention the heirlooms. He didn't even realize the damage they'd done wasn't just legal. It was personal. It was irreparable. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table. The file of receipts and court documents spread before me like a war map. They thought they could take and take and take, and I would stay quiet because I loved them. But love without respect is just servitude, and I wasn't their servant anymore. The next morning, Peter called again. "Do you want to press charges for the jewelry?" he asked. I looked out the window at the gray sky, my reflection faint in the glass. "They didn't just sell gold and diamonds," I said softly. "They sold the last pieces of my trust. That's worth more than any court could demand." Peter didn't speak for a moment. Then he said quietly, "That's your answer then?" "Yes," I whispered. "But we keep fighting. They think they've seen the worst of me. They haven't." As I hung up, I realized something strange. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt ready. And they hadn't even begun to feel what it's like to lose everything. I didn't need to imagine the sound Emily made when she discovered her accounts were frozen. I could hear it in my head perfectly. A sharp, high-pitched wail like glass shattering. Peter called me at 7:13 a.m. His tone was calm, almost clinical. "We've filed the injunction. Their joint accounts are frozen pending litigation. Credit cards, too." "Good," I said softly, staring out the window as the morning sun crept across my lawn. "They'll feel this immediately," he added. "Groceries, bills, subscriptions. They won't be able to buy a latte without running into the block." I imagined Emily's manicured fingers hammering her phone screen, her voice rising in panic as her perfect little world cracked open. It was almost enough to make me smile. By noon, the first sign of their collapse came. Matthew's car screeched into my driveway tires, grinding against gravel. I didn't move. I stayed in the living room, half hidden behind the curtains, heart pounding but hands steady. He stormed up the steps and pounded on my door so hard the frame rattled. "Mom, open the door," he shouted. I stayed silent. "Mom, I know you're in there. Don't do this to us. You're destroying our lives." Our lives, I thought bitterly. Funny how they were never our lives when they left me sitting in a parking lot like a stray dog. Matthew's fists slammed against the wood again. "Emily's crying non-stop. We can't pay our bills. The bank said there's a hold on everything because of you." Still, I didn't move. Through the thin curtain, I could see his face red, contorted, wild with panic. "You're killing us," he screamed. A neighbor's front door opened across the street. Mrs. Hendricks peeked out, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "Mom, open this damn door right now," Matthew shouted, his voice breaking. But I didn't. I just stood there in the shadows, watching quietly. This was the same son who hadn't called me once during the wedding planning except to ask for money. The same son who let his bride text me like I was a nuisance instead of his mother. Now he was the one begging. After 5 minutes of screaming, Matthew's rage turned cold. "You're nothing but a bitter old woman," he shouted. "You'll die alone and no one will care." Then he kicked my trash can over and stormed back to his car. The engine roared as he sped away, leaving tire marks on the street. I didn't flinch. "That evening," Peter called, "they're spreading lies online," he said carefully. "Emily's family is posting on Facebook saying you're a narcissist, that you abandoned Matthew when he was a child, that you're just doing this for attention. I expected that." I said, "They're trying to paint you as unstable. We'll respond if it escalates, but my advice, stay silent. Let them talk. They'll bury themselves." As Peter spoke, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Matthew, at 6 years old, holding up his first art project. Matthew at 16, grinning next to the car I bought him. Matthew at 22, beaming at his college graduation, the tuition I paid for still a weight on my shoulders. And now Matthew, at 30, screaming on my porch because I wouldn't let him bleed me dry anymore. I set the phone down and whispered into the empty room, "Let them talk. Let them hate me. I'm done funding their cruelty." By the end of the week, I didn't have to imagine what they were saying about me. It started small. A few vague posts on Facebook from Emily's mother. "Some people will do anything for attention, even destroy their own family. Pray for us during this difficult time." Then the whispers began. "She's a narcissist. One comment read, "She abandoned her son years ago, and now she's trying to buy her way back into his life. She's greedy. She's suing her own child because she's lonely." The words spread like wildfire, shared by Emily's cousins, her friends, even people I'd never met. I didn't recognize this version of me. They had created a monster in pearls, clutching her checkbook, hell-bent on ruining her son's happiness. At first I told myself it didn't matter that these strangers didn't know me. But at 2:13 a.m., I found myself scrolling through the comments anyway, each one hitting like a stone. The next morning I couldn't eat. I couldn't even bring myself to make coffee. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Dolores, Liv, don't look at any of that garbage online," she said firmly. "They're desperate. You're winning and they know it." "I'm not winning," I whispered. "I'm losing him." There was silence on the line. "You're not losing him," Dolores said softly. "You lost him a long time ago. This is just you finally seeing it." That afternoon, Peter called. "They're trying to bait you." "Olivia," he said calmly, "don't respond. Don't post. Don't call them. Let them scream into the void." "I don't care what strangers think," I said, quietly. "But Matthew, my own son, does." "He really believed this," Peter sighed. "I don't know. But you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that he does." That night, I sat alone in the living room, the house lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp. I pulled out an old photo album from the shelf. Matthew, at 2 years old, grinning with cake smeared across his cheeks. Matthew at 8, holding my hand on his first day of school. Matthew at 18, in a cap and gown, smiling so wide it made my heart ache. Tears blurred the images. "Where did I lose you?" I whispered into the quiet, as if on cue. My phone rang. Peter's name lit up the screen. "Good news," he said the moment I answered. "The judge has ruled." I held my breath. "Olivia, we won." The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. I sat at the long oak table, my fingers laced tightly in my lap. Across the aisle, Matthew refused to look at me. His suit was immaculate, his hair perfectly styled, but his foot tapped nervously against the floor. Emily sat beside him, her arms crossed like she was trying to hold herself together. Even from here, I could see the fury in her eyes. Behind them, her parents whispered to each other, their smug expressions already cracking. Peter leaned toward me. "Stay calm. Let the ruling land before you react. I'm calm," I murmured, though my pulse thundered in my ears. The judge entered robes billowing as she settled behind the bench. "This court has reviewed all financial records, text communications, and affidavit in the matter of Gardner versus Gardner-Collins." She began. My hands gripped tighter. "The evidence shows that the plaintiff—" She nodded toward me, provided significant funds toward the defendant's wedding and down payment for their home. Emily's lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, these funds were gifts freely given." The judge cut him off with a sharp glance. "I've seen no signed gift deed or any documentation stating the funds were unconditional. On the contrary, there are multiple messages from Mrs. Collins acknowledging repayment." Emily shifted in her seat. Matthew's jaw clenched. Therefore, the judge continued, her voice even but firm. "I rule in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants must repay the down payment loan in full within 60 days. Any unsold heirlooms must be returned to Mrs. Gardner immediately." A strangled sound escaped Emily's throat. "The lien on the defendant's home will remain in place until the debt is repaid. Failure to do so will result in foreclosure proceedings." The gavel struck the bench like a gunshot. Court adjourned. Emily broke first. She buried her face in her hands and let out a low, guttural sob. Matthew reached for her, but she shoved his hand away. "This is all your fault," she hissed loud enough for half the courtroom to hear. "You said she'd never fight us." He flinched, his shoulders sagging as her parents hovered behind them, their earlier arrogance replaced by pale, tight-lipped silence. As I stood to leave, Matthew looked up just for a moment. Our eyes met. His were glassy, red-rimmed, but there was no apology in them, only anger. "Please, Mom," he said hoarsely. "Don't do this. Don't take everything from us." I stared at him, my heart hammering in my chest. "I didn't take anything I said quietly. You handed it all away." And then I walked out. On the courthouse steps, Peter joined me, his briefcase in hand. That was the first battle, he said. They have 60 days. If they don't pay, we take the house. I nodded, the weight in my chest shifting. Not gone, but lighter somehow. Behind us, the courthouse doors slammed open. Emily's voice rang out. She's a monster. She'll die alone and no one will care. Peter put a hand on my shoulder. Don't turn around. Don't give them the satisfaction. So I didn't. I kept walking. However, later that day, it started with a knock. Not the angry, pounding fists I'd grown used to. This time, it was softer, hesitant. Through the peephole, I saw Matthew standing there. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. He didn't look like the polished man Emily had molded. He looked like the boy I raised, the one who scraped his knees on the driveway and cried for his mother. "Mom," he said when I opened the door. A crack. His voice was raw, frayed at the edges. "Please, don't do this." I didn't answer. He sank to his knees on my porch. "I'm begging you," he whispered, tears streaking his face. "Emily and I were drowning. The house is about to be taken. We have nowhere to go. Please just give us one more chance." I stared down at him, my heart pounding. Once I would have melted at this sight. Once I would have reached for him, forgiven him, opened my door wide, and invited him back in. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. "I gave you everything I said," my voice calm but cold. Matthew flinched. "I gave you my time, my money, my love. I paid for your education, your first car, your wedding, your home. I sacrificed pieces of myself to make sure you never had to struggle." He sobbed quietly, his shoulders shaking. "And how did you thank me?" I continued. "You let her shut me out of your life. You let her ban me from your wedding reception and didn't even have the courage to call me yourself. You let her sell my mother's necklace for a honeymoon upgrade. Mom, I didn't know." "You knew," I said sharply. "You knew what she was doing and you let her. You chose her over me every single time." His head dropped forward. "She's my wife and I was your mother," I whispered. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then I took a deep breath and said the words I never thought I'd say. "I'm done, Matthew." His head jerked up, eyes wide with panic. "Mom, please don't say that. Don't give up on me." But I didn't flinch. Slowly, I closed the door. The latch clicked into place like a final nail in a coffin. Through the thin wood, I heard him wail softly, "I'm still your son." 2 weeks later, the foreclosure notice went up on their front door. I didn't have to see it to know. Peter called to confirm. They didn't repay within the deadline. "The house is being seized. They'll have to vacate within 30 days, he added. "Do you want me to notify you when it happens?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I want to see it with my own eyes." The day of their eviction, I parked across the street in my car. The air was crisp, the sky gray and heavy. I watched as Matthew and Emily stumbled down the front steps, lugging boxes and garbage bags. Emily's perfect hair was tangled, her eyes swollen from crying. Matthew trailed behind her shoulders, slumped face pale and hollow. The same neighbors who had once attended their housewarming party now stood in doorways, watching silently as the sheriff locked the door behind them. Emily's parents didn't come to help. They'd stopped returning her calls weeks ago. No one came. As they loaded the last of their things into the back of a battered minivan, I felt a single tear slip down my cheek. Not for them, for the boy I once rocked to sleep, for the son I had lost long before this war even started. I started the engine and whispered to the empty car, "Being alone is better than being used." Then I drove away without looking.